There is a threat spreading across America right now. Not in the headlines, not in the political debates, not in the market crashes or the crime statistics. It moves in silence, underground, through pipes you never see, through systems you were never meant to question, and it targets something so fundamental, so basic to human life, that most people never even think to protect it. Water. Not your savings account, not your job, not your Wi-Fi signal. Water. The thing your body demands every single day, the thing you reach for without thinking, the thing that, if it disappeared tomorrow, would make everything else completely irrelevant within 72 hours. Here is what no one is telling you clearly. Over the last decade, something has been shifting beneath the surface of American life. Lake Mead, the largest reservoir in the country, dropped to its lowest level since the 1930s. The Ogallala Aquifer, which feeds millions of homes and farms across the Great Plains, is being drained faster than nature can replenish it. Entire rivers that once ran strong are retreating, quietly, steadily, without fanfare. Scientists have a name for what is happening. They call it a mega-drought, a drought worse than anything recorded in over 1,000 years of climate data. But the drought is just part of the story, because the water that does remain inside your pipes carries its own set of invisible problems: aging infrastructure, chemical contamination, treatment failures that make the evening news for one day and then disappear. The system looks stable until the morning it is not, and that morning arrives faster than anyone expects. Most families will never see it coming because the signs are not dramatic, they are quiet. A pressure drop, a strange taste, a notice in the mail that says, "Do not drink without boiling." By then, the stores are already empty. The question every American family should be asking right now is not whether this can happen. It already is happening. The real question is whether your family will be the ones who prepared before it reached your door. Think about the last time you turned on a faucet and nothing came out. Probably never, or maybe once. A brief interruption, a minor inconvenience, something that resolved itself within hours and faded from your memory before the day was over. That reliability is not an accident. It is the result of an enormous, complex, aging infrastructure that has been quietly holding itself together for decades, and most Americans have never once stopped to ask how long it can keep doing that. Here is what the system actually looks like beneath the surface. The average water pipe running under American streets is over 45 years old. In cities like Chicago, Detroit, and Baltimore, some of those pipes were installed before World War II. They were built for a different population, a different climate, and a different level of demand. They were not built for this. Every single day, water main breaks occur across the United States at a rate that most people would find shocking if they ever saw it presented plainly. Estimates suggest that over 2 trillion gallons of treated drinking water are lost every year through leaks and breaks in the distribution system. That is water that was already cleaned, already treated, already paid for. Gone, vanished into the ground before it ever reached a single home. But the age of the pipes is only one layer of the problem. Consider where the water comes from in the first place. Most American families receive their water from one of 2 sources, either a surface water system, meaning rivers, lakes, and reservoirs, or a groundwater system, meaning aquifers and underground wells tapped by municipal infrastructure. Both of those sources are under pressure right now in ways that have no simple or immediate solution. Surface water is shrinking. The western United States has been in a documented mega-drought for years. Lake Mead, which supplies water to roughly 25 million people across Nevada, Arizona, California, and parts of Mexico, has hovered near historic low levels. When a reservoir drops below a certain threshold, water intake systems begin pulling from lower depths, where sediment concentrates and contamination risk increases. Municipalities adjust their treatment protocols. They add more chemicals. They work harder to deliver the same result, and sometimes the result still falls short. Groundwater is disappearing even faster. The Ogallala Aquifer stretches beneath 8 states and irrigates roughly 30% of all groundwater used for agriculture in the United States. For decades, water has been pumped out of that aquifer at rates far exceeding natural recharge. In some regions, the water table has dropped by hundreds of feet within a single generation. Hydrologists are not speaking in hypotheticals when they describe the eventual depletion of the Ogallala. They are speaking in timelines, and some of those timelines are measured in decades, not centuries. Now add to this the infrastructure that sits between the source and your glass. Water treatment plants are vulnerable to power outages. They are vulnerable to cyber attacks, something federal agencies have been issuing quiet warnings about for years. In 2021, a hacker accessed a water treatment facility in Oldsmar, Florida, and attempted to increase the level of sodium hydroxide in the water supply to more than 100 times the safe limit. An operator caught it in time. But the question that incident left hanging in the air was simple and deeply uncomfortable. What happens the next time someone is not watching? Chemical contamination is not a distant or theoretical concern either. PFAS compounds, commonly known as forever chemicals, have been detected in water supplies across the country. These are synthetic substances that do not break down in the environment or in the human body. They accumulate, they persist, and the infrastructure designed to remove them was, in most cases, never built with them in mind. Lead remains a documented problem in cities that have not yet replaced aging service lines. Nitrates from agricultural runoff contaminate rural wells. Disinfection byproducts form when chlorine interacts with organic matter and linger in tap water at levels that researchers continue to study with growing concern. And through all of this, the average American family continues to turn on the faucet and trust that what comes out is safe. That trust is not irrational. The system works most of the time. But most of the time is not the same as all of the time. And when the system fails, it tends to fail suddenly, without warning, and at the worst possible moment. Here is the part that should make you stop and think. After a major disruption, whether caused by extreme weather, infrastructure failure, contamination, or something else entirely, the average household has less than 72 hours of usable water on hand. Stores run out of bottled water within hours of any regional emergency. Relief distribution takes days to organize, and it always reaches the most vulnerable last. The families who are safe in those moments are not the ones who panicked and rushed to the store. They are the ones who had already stopped depending on a system they could not control. There is a moment that changes everything. It does not always arrive with sirens or breaking news alerts. Sometimes it comes quietly. A neighbor mentioning that their well ran dry. A notice from the city about boil advisories lasting longer than expected. A shelf at the grocery store that should be full of water, but is not. A small crack in the assumption that everything will always be fine. And in that moment, something shifts inside certain people. Not panic. Not paranoia. Clarity. They look at the system they have always depended on, and they see it differently. Not as a guarantee, but as a convenience. One that works until it does not. One that serves the majority until it cannot. one that was never designed with their specific family in mind. And once you see it that way, you cannot unsee it. This is happening across America right now, quietly, without headlines. Families in rural Arizona, in suburban Texas, in the hills of Tennessee and the flatlands of the Midwest are waking up to a simple and deeply practical realization. The most essential resource for human survival should not be entirely in someone else's hands. These are not people living in fear. They are not building underground shelters or preparing for the end of civilization. They are ordinary families, parents with children in school, retirees tending gardens, small business owners, veterans, farmers, teachers. People who have simply decided that genuine security does not come from trusting that nothing will ever go wrong. It comes from being ready when something does. And water is where that preparation begins. Because everything else, food, medicine, shelter, the ability to function and care for the people you love, all of it depends on water first. Remove water from the equation and nothing else matters within days. It is not dramatic to say that. It is simply biological fact. The families who have made this shift share something in common. They stopped waiting for someone else to solve the problem. They started asking different questions. Not what happens if the system fails, but what would we do if it did? Not how long could we last on what we have stored, but how could we stop depending on storing anything at all and start generating what we need directly? That distinction is critical. Storage is a buffer. It buys time. 100 gallons in barrels in the garage buys you a week, maybe 2 if you are careful. But it runs out. And when it runs out, you are back where you started, dependent on a system that may still be broken. Generation is different. Generation means access, continuous, renewable, independent access to water that does not require you to trust a pipe, a municipality, a treatment plant, or a supply chain that may be under pressure at exactly the moment you need it most.
This is the thinking that separates the families who remain calm during a regional emergency from the ones standing in lines hoping someone hands them a case of bottles. The calm families are not calmer because they are braver. They are calmer because they made a decision before the crisis arrived. They removed uncertainty from the equation in advance, and the human nervous system responds to that preparation in a way that is almost physical. There is a kind of quiet confidence that comes from knowing your household does not depend on forces outside your control. Neuroscientists would point to the role of cortisol in moments of scarcity and threat. When the brain perceives that a fundamental need is at risk and no solution is available, stress hormones flood the system. Judgment narrows, decision-making degrades. People do things in those moments that they would never do under normal circumstances. They argue, they hoard, they make expensive and desperate choices. But when the brain perceives that a fundamental need is already secured, something different happens. The threat response quiets. Resources that were allocated to survival mode become available again for clear thinking, for connection, for generosity. The families who prepared are not just safer in a physical sense, they are clearer, they are steadier, they are able to help others rather than compete with them. And that capacity to help becomes its own kind of value in a community under stress. There is something worth paying attention to in the stories of people who have made this shift. Almost universally, they describe the decision not as a sacrifice, but as a relief. The cost of preparation, the time, the planning, the small investment in a system that works independently is nothing compared to the weight that lifts when they realize they have closed a vulnerability that most of their neighbors do not even know exists. They sleep differently. They think about the future differently. They look at uncertainty not as a threat, but as a condition they have already accounted for. That is not a small thing. In a world that is becoming more unpredictable, not less, in a climate that is shifting in ways that directly affect the most basic infrastructure of daily life, the ability to remain grounded, provided for, and self-sufficient is becoming one of the most important qualities a family can cultivate. The people who are doing this are not waiting for permission. They are not waiting for the government to tell them the situation is serious enough to act. They are not waiting for the headlines to get worse before they decide to move. They are moving now, quietly, methodically, without drawing attention to themselves. They are building something that most people around them do not have.
Not stockpiles, not bunkers, independence. And when the moment comes, as moments always do, they will not be scrambling. They will already be ready. For thousands of years, human beings solved the water problem themselves, not through centralized systems, not through municipal treatment plants or distribution networks managed by government agencies. They solved it through knowledge, through ingenuity, through an intimate understanding of how water moves through the natural world and how to work with that movement, rather than depend on someone else to manage it for them. That knowledge did not disappear. It was not erased. It was simply set aside, made unnecessary by the convenience of modern infrastructure, forgotten by generations who grew up turning a faucet and never once having to think about what happened before that water arrived. But the knowledge still exists. And right now, in a moment when the fragility of centralized systems is becoming harder and harder to ignore, that knowledge is being rediscovered, refined, made accessible in ways it has never been before. Here is something that most people do not realize. The atmospheric surrounding your home contains water right now. Not metaphorically, literally. At any given moment, the air holds a measurable and significant quantity of moisture. In humid climates, that moisture content is obvious. You can feel it on your skin. But even in dry regions, even in desert environments, the air carries water. It always has. For most of human history, that atmospheric water was inaccessible in meaningful quantities. Collecting dew from a tarp or building a primitive solar still could sustain a single person in a survival scenario, but it could not reliably supply a household. The scale was wrong. The efficiency was too low. That changed. Through a combination of thermodynamic principles that have been understood for over a century and engineering refinements developed in some of the harshest operational environments on Earth, it became possible to pull water directly from the air at volumes that matter, at volumes that can supply a family, continuously, without pipes, without a connection to an external system, without depending on a reservoir that is shrinking, or an aquifer that is being drained, or a treatment plant that is one cyber attack away from failure. The possibility of extracting clean water from the air has sounded like something from science fiction for some time, yet the underlying science is not complicated. Warm air carries moisture. When that air contacts a surface cooled below its dew point, the moisture condenses. It becomes liquid. It can be collected, filtered, and consumed. Nature does this every morning on grass and glass and metal surfaces. The technology simply does the same thing with intention, with efficiency, and at a scale that serves a real household need. What makes this moment different from any point in the past is not the science itself. The science has been available. What is different is the accessibility.
The ability to implement this principle not as a corporate installation requiring tens of thousands of dollars and a professional technician, but as something a determined and resourceful person can build and maintain themselves, using components that are available, affordable, and replaceable. This is the knowledge that a growing number of American families are quietly acquiring right now, not because they have given up on the existing system, but because they have made a rational decision that a single point of failure is not acceptable when the resource in question is water. When the stakes are that fundamental, redundancy is not paranoia, it is wisdom. Think about what changes when a household has access to water that does not depend on anything outside its own property. The psychological shift is immediate and profound. That low-level background anxiety that most people carry without even naming it, the vague awareness that something could go wrong and there is no real plan, begins to dissolve. The nervous system, which has been quietly monitoring that vulnerability without conscious awareness, recognizes that the threat has been addressed. Something in the body relaxes. And from that place of relaxation, everything else functions better. Decisions are clearer, relationships are steadier. The future looks less like a source of threat and more like something to move toward with intention. That is not a small return on a practical investment. Joseph's Well is a guide built around this principle. It documents a method tested and refined through direct personal experience for creating an independent water source using atmospheric moisture, accessible materials, and a system that can function both connected to standard power and completely off-grid. It is not a product in the traditional sense. It is a transfer of knowledge. The kind of knowledge that used to pass from one generation to the next as a matter of survival literacy, and that was lost not because it stopped being valuable, but because convenience made it seem unnecessary. Convenience is a fragile foundation. The families who understand that are already building something more durable, something that does not depend on decisions made in offices far from their homes, something that belongs entirely to them. The information exists. The method works. The only variable is whether you encounter it before you need it or after.
Before is better. It is almost always better. And if something in what you have heard today has stirred something in you, some recognition, some quiet urgency that you cannot quite dismiss, that response is worth paying attention to. It usually means you already know what time it is.